All right, welcome everyone. Again, thank you for joining us today for our national webinar series on authentic engagement, people with lived expertise shaping homeless programs and policies. We can go to the next slide. Again, as you're logging in, if you can let us know in the chat your name, agency, and where you're joining us from today. My name is Karis Manus. I'm a Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination here with the National Community Action Partnership, and I'll be working behind the scenes today along with my colleague Denise Waits to help the webinar go smoothly. So a few technical notes as we get started. We will be recording the webinar, and we'll be making this recording and slides available to you following today's presentation. If you have any questions or comments, if you can please submit those through the chat function as well. Next slide. So we want to begin the webinar with our land acknowledgement. We know that every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. So I'm joining you all today from North Carolina. So for me, this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Lumbee people, and I pay my respect to elders, both past and present, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. And we'll share the link in the chat if you want to deliver your statement for the land and people where you're joining us from today. Next slide. We also like to begin each webinar by grounding ourselves in the promise of community action. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. We'll begin with some introductions. So this is our practice transformation team. As I mentioned, my name is Karis Manus. I'm a Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination. We also have on our team Tiffany Marley, our Senior Vice President of Practice Transformation, Lily Sills, Director of Practice Transformation, Jennifer Gregory, Director of Mobility, Learning Design and Practice, as well as Taylor Daniel, Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination, and Tamaritas Hollywood, Senior Associate of Learning and Dissemination. Today's webinar is brought to you as part of our Learning Communities Resource Center here at the National Community Action Partnership. This is the learning hub within the Community Services Block Grant Network that supports the identification, adaptation, and implementation of innovative and evidence-informed services and strategies to improve results based on individual, family, and community-level outcomes for the CSBG network. Today's webinar is brought to you as part of the Housing Opportunities Expansion and Homelessness Prevention Learning Community Group, which focuses on a spectrum of housing challenges and opportunities, including homelessness prevention and rehousing. So our agenda for today, we begin with our welcome and introductions. As mentioned, today's webinar is on authentic engagement, people with lived expertise shaping homeless programs and policies. Following the speakers' presentations today, we'll have some time of question and answer, and then we'll close with some resources and upcoming events. So today's presentation will be moderated by Josh Johnson. Josh is a Senior Technical Assistant Specialist with the Center for Capacity Building at the National Alliance to End Homelessness. Before joining NAEH, he was the Director of Training and Equitable Practice at the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio. There he promoted utilization of evidence-based practices through equity-infused training and technical assistance, coalition building, and guidance creation throughout Ohio. He has worked in social services for over 15 years, beginning his career in the mental and behavioral health field, working with adolescents and single adults. Josh worked as the family advocate team lead at the YWCA Family Shelter in Columbus, Ohio. He is a graduate of Hampton University and holds a degree in elementary education and psychology. Josh will also be joined today by Samantha Wood at the National Alliance to End Homelessness, LaToya Cooper, and John DeCarmine. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Josh to get us started with today's presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Karis, and I appreciate the land and labor acknowledgement, which is so important to ground us in that for starting our conversation, any conversation. So, and within that theme of ensuring equity and justice, we're here today to talk about how we can center the voices and raise and lift the voices of folks with lived experience to help shape the policies and policies that we implement in the homeless response system. I am so excited to have the wonderful panel that I'll get to moderate a little bit. I'll do a little bit of a level set prior to passing it on, but I have Samantha Wood and Latoya Cooper and John DeCarmine will tell you a little bit more about themselves. But we are really excited to have this conversation and to continue to co-learn as we have these conversations. So use the chat. We'll try to make it as engaging as possible, ask questions. We'll have time throughout, we'll ask some polls. I'm really excited about the amount of folks from all over the country who are on this call. I see some of the homeless system folks on here, the community action folks. So it's a really great mix of folks. And we're excited to be here, excited for the invitation by the National Community Action Partnership. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have an hour together. So the Alliance, if you are not familiar, we are a nonprofit organization with the focus of ending homelessness. And we do this in three pillars. One is through research, one is through policy and advocacy, and the other one is through capacity building, which the umbrella that I work under. So here is a little bit more about us. But again, we are committed to working to end homelessness. I do want to ensure, I always want to make sure when we use any language, we're grounded with a common understanding. And what when we say people with lived experience, we use the Oxford's definition of personal knowledge about the world gained through direct firsthand involvement in everyday events, rather than through representation constructed by other people, rather than reading about it, rather than going to school about it. It's actually going through it. And understanding it firsthand. So when we're going to use PLE, we're going to use people with experience, people with lived expertise. This is the language of which we're referring to. And prior to us going into authentic engagement, we do want to acknowledge, right, that historically community actions and the homeless response system have utilized the voice of folks with lived experience. We recognize that community actions have made it a priority to ensure folks with lived experience are part of the structures, of boards. So we do want to acknowledge that, right? But I'll speak specifically for the homeless system, that there hasn't always been as authentic of engagement as needed. So I'm going to start with the bigger picture, like what is the problem, right? So we had ineffective policy and services that do not benefit the folks who is designed to benefit. And why is that, right? There historically has been power hoarding, where decision-making is really only at the top. And there's not transparency, there's no power sharing. There's usually in most organizations, a lack of diversity. The folks who are making the decisions at the very top don't look like the folks who are being served. And that could be the senior leadership team, that could be your board, or maybe the executive director who is making all the decisions. And we've seen that there's been tokenism, right? There'll be one person who has lived experience, and sometimes it might be lived experience from 30 years ago, and they're on all the boards and they check the box. There's no power being shared. There's no really decision making. There's no ability to vote on decisions. There's no expertise being provided or information being given prior to those meetings. And it's really just there to say, yes, we have someone lived experience on our board, but that is not being that's not authentically engaging someone. So I wanted to give a big picture definition of what we mean when we say authentic engagement. We're going to use the Casey Family's program definition, right? It really breaks it down into 4 pillars, right? If you're going to really do authentic engagement, you have to share power, right? And truly share power, not just in saying we share power. I mean, with all decisions that are made need to be collective and share with all the folks involved. And it is always most important to have the folks who are going to be impacted by those decisions being at the table with when as that power is being delegated. So I'm trying to read. I'm reading the chat, and yes, the PowerPoint will be made available. And hey to all the folks in the chat. So also another pillar is prioritizing people with lived experience as they're at the table, right? If you're inviting folks to the table, we're sharing power, but we're prioritizing your voice because your voice is it's closest to what we're trying to do. You know what the system looks like. You know what happens when this policy is being established. So your voice should be elevated. Another piece to authentic engagement, creating physical and physiological and psychological safety, right? So what does that look like? That means, is the space that you're inviting people in safe? Is it a culture that welcomes diversity in thought? Are you inviting people to assimilate? Are you inviting people to create whatever the table is? Or are you inviting them to be a part of whatever the direction you're already headed, right? Are you equipping folks with the knowledge and the information? Are we using all this jargon and not giving people like mentorship and checking in with folks before and after meetings and making sure that they have access to all the information that's going to be discussed in meetings or to do their job correctly, right? Because the last thing we want to do under the guise of incorporating voices of lived experience is to do harm, right? Is to check a box. And we must do more. And those pillars are what we consider authentic engagement. And my wonderful panel will talk a little bit more about that here shortly. But before I go on a little bit more, I want to just launch a really quick poll and see, how many of you all do you feel like are using authentic engagement in your program or your organization? So you should see a poll. And it is anonymous, so you won't know who's saying what. So just be as truthful as you can. We're at about close to 70% of folks have responded. Let's give it a few seconds, see if we can get it closer to 80. I see your image. Yep, not yet. All right. All right, I'm going to end this poll. So it looks like around 52% say yes, we are doing it. We are really authentically engaging folks with lived experience. 24% said no, and 25% said unsure, right? And I saw some other ones in the chat that says we're working on it and on occasion. So I appreciate you all's honesty and transparency. So look, we're about 50-50, right? Which hopefully by after we share some information today, give us some time for the seeds to grow, we can be closer to 100%. All right. So again, kind of before giving passing the mic to my wonderful panelists, I just want to talk about kind of what some of the research says about really engaging folks in a meaningful way with lived experience. While we understand that most of the research we found, specifically around homelessness engagement within the system, was focused more on process and not outcome. What we have been able to look at is, look at authentic engagement in other fields, such as like substance use or mental health treatment. And there's been clear evidence that employing people with lived experience as peer workers, other workers within the program will produce significant benefits. For clients, services are delivered with fidelity and can lead to improved outcomes like decreased hospitalizations, better attendance, improved engagement with the treatment or services, and more confident and feel less stigmatized and better prepared to create change in their lives. For peer workers or folks who are doing that direct service, they found improved self-efficacy, feeling valued, and having some compensation. And it provides a sense of purpose and belonging. So, the scope of the review of it's integrating people with lived experience into the service design delivery in the homeless response is described as both the right thing and the smart thing to do, meaning you should be engaging in the practice, both for a moral and ethical reason, and because for the potential of improving service delivery and how our overall system performs. As again, our goal at the Alliance, and I'm sure a lot of you all go along here, is to end homelessness. And I know for community action, it's really to end and address poverty. So really, utilizing these practices will help us take steps towards that lofty goal. So again, just another big picture why it improves connection, collaboration, services for individuals in the system. It offers really a firsthand knowledge of what the expertise and experience of what these policies and services what the impact is, right? While you're designing how these policies, what we should do, having those folks who have been a part of the system, have seen it, really can help inform decision making and lead us to a way that's really more equitable and justice as a service delivery system. I would give a quick community example where I was working with the community, and they really started being more intentional about including folks with lived experience and their COC process, and they were going to visit a provider in the community. And while they were going to do this big visit to look at the provider, the individual said, I remember staying at this program, and whenever we had visitation, they would have all of the residents in this program clean up, make everything looks super nice. They would change things around so it appeared to look a certain way. And wow, how much value does that add to making decisions about funding and where funding should go? And if you can really hear from the firsthand experience of folks who've actually been into those places. So lastly, why specifically for the homeless system, it's been and it continues to be a priority for the COC competition. So you actually get more funding for doing this, specifically doing it the right way. As I would say, the cherry on top with the understanding that is not the most vital piece. So where can this happen, right? I said peer support, but that's not the only place. Having folks with lived experience on your board, represented in your leadership, direct service, who you consult with, having intentional partnerships with consumer advisory groups within the community. One of my favorite quotes I've heard, and it was like during a HUD listening session where communities are like, well, how do we pay for folks with lived experience for their expertise? And it was a simple answer. Well, you can hire them. So again, how compensate? You make room, you power share by allowing voting and decision making, and again, you hire them. So I didn't want to kind of leave this high big picture framing without sharing a little bit about what the Alliance has done, because we've had to make some really intentional decisions as we're working to be more equitable and just organization. So I'm going to pass it to Samantha, who'll talk a little bit about kind of the Alliance's work on ensuring that we are utilizing authentic engagement.
Thank you so much, Josh, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you today. I'm Samantha Wood. I'm the National Field Organizer with the Alliance. My main role is to make sure that the Alliance connects with folks like you in the field. So I'm happy to be here today. We have done a lot of intentional work over the past couple of years, especially the past year, with making sure that the voices of persons with lived experience are heard and seen, and that we make sure that our work is engaged in what they want and what they see are priorities for our work. We have a consumer advisory board that started about 4 years ago. It's 11 members, and they are all persons with lived experience from around the country. They provide feedback and input on what should be driving our work as far as our policy, our research, and our TA. They provide us feedback and insight on what's going on in their communities and what they see are problems. They also help us with our strategic planning to make sure that our priorities match what the needs are on the ground, which is very important to us. And I am grateful and honored to be able to have been able to work with these amazing people from all over the country who dedicate their lives every day to ending homelessness and helping their peers meet their needs. We also have 2 conferences every year. We usually have one in around March in California, and we have one in July in DC. In the past year, we have made sure that we invited more persons with lived experience to participate. So last year in July, we invited over 80 lived experience folks to our conference. They were advocates, scholarship recipients, CAB members, and other lived experience folks in our network. And that was amazing to see so many lived experience folks attend our conference and get to network and meet people who otherwise they wouldn't have ever interacted with. Also, recently in our March conference that we had a couple of weeks ago in Oakland, we had over 50 persons with lived experience attend. For the first time, we had a lived experience kind of room set aside, a lounge set aside for folks to meet and network. And it was great to see everyone kind of hang out and sit down and get to know each other. So I encourage anyone who may be in charge of events and coordinating conferences to think about perhaps doing something similar. The feedback that I received is that everyone felt like they were part of the conference. They felt like their voices were being heard. They felt like they truly were making an impact. Also, part of our conference this year, we did co-create workshops where members of our CAB actually were the ones that took the lead on workshops and created topics for our workshops, recruited speakers, and also spoke. We did very little to intervene with those workshops. They did all the work, and we got amazing feedback from those co-created workshops. We also worked with the Housing Justice Collective, and they were amazing at guiding us on how to do these workshops, and they also spoke at our conference. So that was great to see more persons with lived experience at the table and involved in our conferences, whereas before, sadly, they were not. And also, a part of my role is advocacy and policy work and connecting persons with lived experience and field partners with members of Congress. So we've been making sure that lived experience is at the table when meeting with members of Congress. We invite organizations, but we also make sure that folks with lived experience are there. So politicians will listen to us, but they truly are most interested in what folks on the ground think and feel. So we want to make sure that politicians understand why it's so important to fund things such as housing first programs or prevention assistance or affordable housing. They really hear it from the folks who have lived it. So that's why we make sure that we bring them to the table, especially for our annual Capitol Hill Day and other events. We also made a recent effort to make sure that we hire persons with lived experience. So we're actually in the process of hiring a director of lived experience who has lived experience. So that's exciting to be able to have someone on staff who is fully dedicated to making sure that we integrate persons with lived experience at our work and who also has lived experience. Really under the guidance of Anna Leva over the past year, we've really made strides into making sure that our primary focus is the folks who have been most impacted and honestly know the most about ending homelessness. So we are not perfect, but we are definitely on the roadmap to making sure that the voices that need to be heard and respected and listened to are there. And so with that being said, I'd like to introduce you to the amazing Latoya Cooper, who is the Community Engagement Associate at Linsco, based in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. All right, hi everyone. My name is Latoya Cooper. I am based in Los Angeles, California, and I am a community engagement associate with Linsco, which is a research organization, and we are in partnership with Housing Justice Collective and True Colors United. And with that, in Los Angeles County, we have created um, this body of work called a young person-led intermediary. And with that, it's basically our solution to cracking down on LA County's homeless crisis. One thing that we experience in LA County is chronic homelessness with our youth. Our numbers are like literally insane. We've been doing homeless counts every year, and before COVID, we seen that it was more so it was like, I guess, a stationary like level of homelessness, but it was more resources being actually used to where it was a little more help. But as after COVID, it's like so many organizations were shut down, so many nonprofits were shut down. People couldn't stay on their feet. So it caused just a drop and a big increase in the youth homeless population. So as of now, it's like, if that's not the focus, then we're not gonna have a solution to this crisis. If we don't realize that our youth are becoming homeless, which is making our young adults become homeless, which is making our older adults become homeless. They're not seeing the system and how it works, then we don't get a solution. So to the work that we're doing, we've created this young person led intermediary. What that consists of right now is three big departments where we're changing the narrative on how we see youth homelessness, but creating the solution on what we feel is effective. So, for example, with um with our with our work, we have a group of young people. So, as if you could see the screen, it's we have this inner circle, which is consists of me and a couple of my colleagues who consist of a cohort. We're all young people in LA County who are associated with youth action boards, or just advocates that's been advocating for youth homelessness as of today. And on the outer end, you see our supportive staff, which is Housing Justice Collective and True Colors United and Linsco staff, who support the work we do. Um, this is like how our team is structured. The inner circle is the decision makers, which is us as the young people. Everything we do within this intermediary goes through how we want it done and how we feel that it will be effective for our community and our young people. So if you see on the outside of the circle, it says SPA team. A SPA is a service planning area in LA County. That's how it's divided up. According to LASA, it's divided up into service planning areas, which is 1 through 8, and that covers all of LA County. So an example of what we're doing, you can go to the next slide. But an example of what we're doing, oh, you can skip this slide because we're going to get to that at the end. But here we go. An example of what we're doing is power building. And a way we're doing that is organizing SPA teams. SPA teams are, like I said, serving planning area is like, for example, is a couple cities within LA County. So if LA County, I don't know the facts, please do not judge me. If LA County has 15 cities, which I know it has more, it's broken up into, those 15 cities are broken up into 8 departments. Like basically, like it's broken up to 8 different sections. So within these different sections, we're creating teams, which consist of 6 young people at the minimum and community partners. We use we're using LASA's regional coordinators for each SPA. And if we're not using the regional coordinator, which is like the lead person for that SPA, the lead agency for that SPA, if we're not using them, then we're using someone who's closely connected, someone who still has a great participation with youth and everything of that nature. So what these teams consist of is young people and community-based organizations, nonprofits, activists, funders. We want a team of community within each service area that is making decisions and keeping us in the know on the current crisis in each community. Because one thing we realize, we do not have the same problems all over LA County. The homeless situation are different. The resource situations are different. Everything is different in each area. So we have to break it down to figure out how to get to the whole. So when we visited each service, each SPA, it was just all different responses. So we realized we have to start from scratch. So the way we're doing that is creating these teams. We decided to get them like off the floor with it. We're funding. We as an agency are funding them to create these teams to make sure the young people are compensated at a good hourly rate that is suitable for their time. Our hourly rates start at $25 an hour. That's the minimum you can pay a young person to do the work, because at the end of the day, no matter what, everyone comes to this work and they're already on salary. They're already getting compensated. They already have their flow. So if you're going to use people with lived experience and you're going to get their expertise to change this network and change the dynamic of the work we're doing, then they have to be paid and compensated equally. And for now, that's what we can do, and that's what affordable. So we're helping them, start up with that and get them to where they can hire their young people and create this table. This is all in the starting run with the tables. So within the next 6 to 8 months, we'll probably have our tables created where we can really jump into the work. But for now, we're trying to create the structure on how we're going to do this, because we need this to stay and we need the foundation to be strong so it lasts. Because a lot of programs and situations don't last if it's not concrete. So that's an example of what we're doing. Also, something we've done is created a YAB network, which consists of youth action boards. If you're not familiar with youth action boards, they consist of like, if you're familiar with LASA, then LASA Youth Action Board is HIFLA. And that's a group of young people with lived experience able to be on a board where they're helping making decisions, help navigating funds, and help doing whatever is necessary and whatever in their capacity of their board. So these boards become powerful now because it's youth led. So we're trying to create a network where all the youth action boards are connecting. They're doing the work together. We're meeting together. We're saying, hey, you guys work with you're working with public policy, but we have this policy that we're trying to deal with, that we're trying to dissect and figure out how we can help alter it or, get it back, on the ballots pretty soon or something. Basically, we want solutions. So we're trying to figure out how to connect us all to where we're all doing the work together and using each other as needed, because every youth action board has a focus. So if we put our focuses together, we get a more concrete solution to our problem because we have more minds. And it's all young people with lived experience, young people who are actually who are in these systems, who are on the opposite end now, who are working these systems as well. So that's something that's also getting started in LA County. And then a big thing that we're doing that we're now about to go into our second round of doing is a pooled fund. We did a grant last year for I believe 1.6 million, and we were able to award 7 organizations for housing and youth collaboration. And when I say we, I mean me and my inner people that was in that inner circle. That's who I meant as we. Like, the funders brought the idea to us and they told us, hey, we have an opportunity for you as young people to lead this work, and we want you to lead the work your way, whatever you see fit, based off your experience in LA County. And we did exactly that. We chose small nonprofits who don't get seen, who don't get regular funding, who budget was under 3 million. We chose nonprofits that represented LGBTQ and BIPOC communities. We chose nonprofits who also supported that in their staffing, and basically who are also working to do youth collaboration, and who are also doing like housing programs for our young people. So we were able to get like 25 applicants. We dropped it down to 7 we chose and awarded. They already been awarded. They already been jumping into the work. We already started our little network with them, and it flowed well. And this time around, we got more funds, we got more support, and we have bigger ideas on how we're going to do it this time around, which like is also supporting the spa teams. Some money we had left over from our pooled fund we use for the spa teams so they can start compensating their young people to create these tables. So we're really like making sure that with the work we're doing that you could typically get a agency to do, we're making sure the young people are doing it and making sure that we're making the decisions. We're doing the scoring. We're doing the interviews. We're having the conversation. We're speaking with the funders. So all to say, all this work we're doing is starting a change in LA County. It's starting to get us to a point where we see that this is the solution. Young people having the expertise they have, and young people being able to make the decisions they're able to make with the work because they experienced it is the solution. And with all that, I say it's way more work coming out of it. So I feel that if we start somewhere, we get somewhere. And we're almost in year 2, and it's flowing, it's going, and young people are getting housed. Solutions, like we're getting solutions, we're getting buildings, we're getting buildings like authorized to, you know, be approved for housing that was abandoned. Like, we have got some magical outcomes out of this stuff, and I'm just like, this is the way to go. So for future people and people who don't feel like they have young people involved, it's not hard. The easiest way to do it is give them the opportunity, because you would never know the potential. We all, as the young people, didn't know the potential we had, but we jumped into it, and we've been dominating the scene, and we've been really creating a big network of young people. And because young people see people like themselves, people who look like them doing the work, they want to do it. They want to come and they want to fight the fight with us. So we have to make sure we're all equally represented in the whole of the work. Like, it's no person who can lack representation. It's we are all one. And if we start shaping like the work to see that, we'll be great. We'll get the solutions. And that's really all I can really say, but you will see more out of LA County in about a year or 2. So, look forward to it. Thank you guys so much for giving me a chance today and listening. I will drop my email in the chat for anyone who has any questions for me directly if we don't get time to talk today. Oh, there we go. It's on the board. Thank you.
Wow, so much, so many gems was just dropped, Latoya. That was phenomenal. Thank you for just highlighting how by utilizing authentic engagement, we can really see shifts in how work is done and the outcomes. And it's by sharing space, creating space for those voices to do what works. And that's a prime example. So for the purpose of time, I'm going to pass it on to John DeCarmine, who's going to talk more from a organizational end, right? So we talked about what happened when voices are at the table, but how can organizations make the shift to make sure that the voices are at the table and are lifted up? So I'll pass it to you, John.
All right. Thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate it. Thank you, Latoya. Thank you, Samantha. Thanks to everybody for having us here. I'm so excited that we are having this conversation as an industry and as a group of people who understand that nobody has a better idea of what people need than the people who are actually going through a situation. Josh, if you would skip to the next slide, I want to start just by kind of giving a quick overview of who I am and where I'm from. My name's John. Work as the executive director in Gainesville, Florida, and operate a program called Grace. So we are on a 23-acre campus. We are an extremely low barrier emergency shelter. We've got co-ed, veterans, men's, women's programs, all co-located. We've got kind of all the basic needs, healthcare, everything you would need. And then on the next slide, you'll see we also do 42 units of permanent supportive housing, a housing-focused street outreach team. We're fully pet friendly, lots of cool stuff. And almost all of the cool ideas that we have came by asking the people who are using our services what they need. And a lot of this actually came from asking our team. One of my absolute favorite things about the team of people who we are as Team Grace, 6 out of 10 of us have been homeless previously. So right there, we know that the majority of people who are involved in our decision-making processes have experienced homelessness. Many stayed in our shelter. 7 out of 10 of us, sometimes, and there's overlap here, but 7 out of 10 of us have experience in recovery from drugs or alcohol. And so when people are showing up and saying, gosh, what would help this program or what would support people here better? We've got some lived expertise there. And then almost 2 out of 10 of us have either been locked up or have had close family members incarcerated in a way that has dramatically impacted our lives. So we start from a position of understanding that the decisions that we make are only as good as the people who are helping make those decisions. And if you would switch to the next slide, we'll kind of go from here. If there's anything I want to emphasize today, it's this. It's that there is an enormous gap between inauthentic engagement and authentic engagement. I've heard that repeatedly mentioned here, and I'm so happy to see that. You know, we could always, as an organization, check the box, and we could always tell you that I had a formerly homeless person on the board. I could tell you that we asked people what they wanted or needed. I have even gone so far as to, you know, speak to 2 or 3 people, and then I would go up and say, yeah, I've talked to homeless folks, as if 2 or 3 people could actually carry the message of the entire homeless community. So we have checked the box. We have also moved toward authentic engagement. And on the next slide, I'll show you this kind of continuum of where we started. And I think a lot of us are in this no engagement zone to begin with. And somewhat more insidious than that, I think, is anywhere in this no engagement or checking the box area. Neither of those get you where you need to be. Certainly, if you're looking at no engagement, you can call it no engagement. You could also just say that implicit in not engaging with people with lived expertise is an assumption that we know what's best for people. And we know that that's not true. We know that that involves holding on to power and holding on to control. It often does not translate to treating people like adults. It almost keeps nonprofits or different homeless service programs, particularly, in this strange parental role. So if we can't get out of that without actually talking to the people who we're serving and figuring out what we need to do. So when we talk about checking the box, you know, that's something I think I saw in that survey. we had a lot of people saying, yeah, we're doing authentic engagement. A lot of people saying, no, we're not. And then quite a few people are unsure. And sometimes you should be unsure. You know, you've got to check in with people to make sure you're not just jumping ahead and having heard what you wanted to hear. And when you do that, it slows down your process. It really does. And that's critically important because we are sharing power. We are sharing time. I'm going to go into an example of how we used lived expertise to shape a program that has turned into a national model that would never have been as good if we had just done it ourselves. And we wanted to make sure that the people who would be living in a camp that we were building knew what they were getting into, that it was what they were hoping for and expecting, and that they would stay there once they got there. So, you know, when we get to the authentic part of this, it typically looks a little bit slower. It typically looks a little bit messier. It doesn't always work the first time. And that's important too. How many times have you hired somebody and the job didn't work out? Or how many times have you gotten into a relationship with somebody and it didn't work out? You should expect that any kind of relationship that's built around power sharing and communication may have its ups and downs, but overall, this is the only way we're going to get where we need to go if we have policies that are reflective of what people actually need. Josh, next slide, please. So this little model here is very similar to what we saw from the Casey Foundation. This model is not just for authentic engagement. This is a great model for case management. This is a great model for just about any other relationship you will be in the course of your human existence. You know, people need to feel safe to share information with you. If everybody is afraid of your response when you ask them, hey, what do you think we should do? You're not going to get good information. If people are afraid that they will be penalized or otherwise punished for telling you what's really going on, then you will not get the information that you need. So this process starts with just having a decent functioning relationship with people, and over time building trust and following through on what you say you're going to do and making sure that people are aware that they are heard. And that leads to these power sharing arrangements that are so important to get people's actual expertise to contribute to what you are doing. So when we go through each of these steps, though, I think about my friend Peter has a really good example. He is somebody with lived expertise. He's on our Continuum of Care Governance Board. I ran into him at the NAEH conference last summer. He used to be a maintenance guy. And when he would talk to committees in our community, he would say, you know, you can call a maintenance guy into an apartment and they may walk up the stairs once and maybe the stairs squeak, maybe they don't squeak, but they get one shot as they walk through. But you want to talk to the people who live in the apartment, who walk up that staircase a dozen times a day. They know exactly where the stairs squeak. They know exactly which, you know, what angle the dishwasher has to be at for it to leak. So there is a familiarity with all of your programs and services that not even you as the people who run them have, but only comes by talking to the people who are using those services day in and day out. I'm going to switch now to the next slide, and I want to talk a little bit about a project that we were involved in where there was a homeless camp out behind our shelter. We knew it was not good for anybody. The people there told us it was not good for anybody, and we needed it to close down. Now, we knew that there are tons of ways to close a homeless camp, and most of them are terrible. Most of them involve cops, most of them involve bulldozers, and most of them involve showing up, telling a whole bunch of people who have lived someplace for years that they have 20 minutes to pack up all of their stuff and go. And the first question that they would ask is, where do I go? We knew that if we could not answer that question of where do I go, then we would have a pretty bad situation where people were scattering all over the community, where our outreach teams could not find people to follow up with them when their name came up on the housing list, and where the entire community started to look at homeless systems and say, gosh, this isn't working. I see homeless people everywhere. So we were going to create a safe camp on our campus that we would use to close this down. And when we started, we originally were planning on doing this in about a month. we realized almost immediately that if we built a safe camp without asking the people who we hoped would move in, nobody was going to move in. And when we started asking people, what we found, there were 222 people in that camp when we started, and less than 40 of them were willing to actually move into this new camp that we were going to create based on what we told them. So that means that there would have been 180 people scattered around the community simply because we said, hey, this place we want you to go is ready, but we never asked if they wanted to use it or how it would go. So starting from that spot of 1 out of 5 people said that they would move into our shelter or onto our campus when the camp closed, we knew we had to slow down that process, and we knew we had to start meeting with people weekly and sharing all of the information that we had with them, the good information, the bad information, the things we couldn't wait to tell them, and the things that they deserved to know because we had a trusting relationship, but it wasn't always stuff that was great, you know. And when people are living in a state of crisis and they have pressing, immediate emergency needs all the time, it can be really hard to explain to people why something is taking 6 months. It can be really hard to explain to people why their problem that they need solved right now has to go to a committee or has to be spoken about by a team of people before it can be done. But we had to share that and let people know. So overall, we'll close with this. We were in a situation where we were going to open a safe camp, and only 1 out of 5 people were coming into that safe camp because they thought it was a really bad idea. So we started asking questions, and we said, well, what if we were not only going to have you move into the shelter, but what if we would allow you to set up tents on the shelter property, and if we would manage the camping and keep it safe? And just by jumping from you have to move into the shelter or someplace else to we would be able to allow you to camp on our property, suddenly we went from 20% of people being willing to move in to 50%. Then we went a little bit further and we said, okay, well, we're at half. What if we didn't just have a men's shelter and we didn't just have a women's shelter, but what if we ran this campground and it was co-ed, just like our co-ed shelter? Well, just by making that tweak, because that's what people told us they needed, suddenly we're at 63% of people said that they would move in and move on to our campus. And then when we changed that last variable about being pet friendly, and we said, okay, not only would we be low barrier, but we would also allow camping, and we would allow you to stay with your husband or your wife or your long-term partner or whoever else. What if we became pet friendly? And when we asked about being pet friendly, suddenly 7 out of 10 people, this is up from 2 out of 10, 7 out of 10 people said that they would move on to our campus and allow us the honor of continuing to work with them to get them moving into housing. Josh, next slide, please. This is my last one. So right from the start, we ended up in a situation where we wanted to bring as many people in as possible. We also started having weekly meetings, as I said, with these folks. One of the things that we had done is we would use this iterative process. So I would show up on Monday and I would talk to this room of 20 people and I'd say, here's a couple ideas. Here's what we're thinking about doing. And half the time they would just say that, John, that's a really stupid idea. Why don't you do this instead? Or why don't you do this? And I'd say, okay, we'll get together, we'll work on this for the week. And then we would come back a week later and we would say, we have heard you. Here's what we think you told us was the right thing to do. How does this look? And either at that point, we would get it right and we would move on to the next one, or they would say, nope, you still missed the mark. And why don't you try this? Or why don't you do this? And there were probably dozens of ways that we ultimately changed the project as a result of this. But some of the key things that we learned just by talking to people who were there, one, when we initially wanted to lay out this safe camp, we wanted it to have a row of 10 tents and then another row of 10 tents and basically 100 tents in a row, but in rows of 10. And the first thing people said is, that is a horrible way to lay out a camp. I need to be able to stand wherever I'm standing and look to see if somebody's trying to get into my tent, regardless of where I am. So hearing that, and not having been somebody who'd ever had to worry about that, we were able to just lay out all the tents in a circle so that wherever you were in the campground, you could see if somebody was messing with your stuff. That was a huge thing that got people to move in. We also found that when we asked people about policies and procedures, we're a bunch of really well-meaning homeless advocates who are trying our best to carry out the philosophy and the practice of low barrier sheltering. And surprisingly, we heard people say, we need stronger responses to violence. We don't want you just to talk to somebody who punches somebody and tell them that's against the rules and they can't do it again. We need that person not to be allowed here because they're making it unsafe for other people. So we actually changed our policies and procedures to make sure that people knew if there was violence in the camp, that those campers had a mechanism for removing those most violent people, because in every other camp they had been in, it was survival of the fittest. And they did not want to be back in that situation where whoever was strongest got to make the rules. Similarly, and building on that, we have added anonymous campers to our ban review committee, because though we had tried to have homeless representation on the ban review process before, what we found was people wanted to do it, but they were afraid of any kind of retaliation if they spoke out against some of the more violent people in the camp. So they helped us create a way that they could weigh in anonymously on whether somebody was causing threats to the health and safety of other people there without having to expose themselves or be subject to any kind of retribution. And through that entire process, which again took 3 times as long as it would have otherwise, but came out 100 times better than it would have, we went from a situation where 80% of people said that they were going to scatter around the community and they would not move into where we were, to only 19 people, so less than 10%, actually scattered and moved elsewhere in the community, and we were able to house or divert every other person. Again, that only came as a result of us getting information from people. The final piece that we had done is we also built in a survey process, so that for each of these weekly meetings, at the end of the meeting, we wanted to make sure that people understood what was happening. We wanted to make sure that people that we were making changes that people believed were necessary, and we wanted to make sure that people were feeling respected. So we would ask those questions on an anonymous survey at the end of every meeting. And what we found at the end of the project was, on a scale of 1 to 10, the average score was 8.3 out of 10 that people understood the changes that were happening. 8.6 out of 10, the score told us that people knew and felt that changes needed. And on average, scoring an 8.3 out of 10, and 83% of people said that they felt very respected throughout the process. So for us, we wanted to make sure that we were not only putting out these ideas, but we were listening directly to people, and they were helping us shape a project that became ultimately greater than it ever could have been if we had just tried to do it on our own. And with that, I'll hand it back to you, Josh, and be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John and Latoya. You guys dropped so much good information in the chat. Everyone is hollering about all the things that was brought up. We have to, John, if you could put your email in the chat. I did not have it.
Sure thing, we'll do.
No, thank you. So I have to pass it to the community action group. I did want to just some key just very high level takeaways from our time. I'm not going to read them all. We'll send the PowerPoint later. And listening to our experts, you hear why these are key to making fundamental change. And then here are just some additional resources that you all can go to from some of our partners who have more information on how to authentically engage folks with lived experience. I'm going to pass it to you, Karis. I know you have some closing to do.
Yes, thank you, Josh, and thank you all for sharing. This was a great presentation today, a lot of great conversation and thoughts in the chat as well. So we appreciate all of you for being here today. I'm just quickly going to share some resources with you that we have here at the National Community Action Partnership, and we'll be sharing these in our follow-up email as well. So you'll have access to all of the links and registration that's available for the upcoming events. But just quickly wanted to share with you a few things that we have here. So first, we want to be able to hear from you about today's training. So we have a evaluation link we'll share in the chat. We want to hear if this training today was helpful for you. As we're planning future events, we want to make sure that we're being supportive of you all's needs. Next slide. We also have a housing opportunities and homelessness prevention resource hub. So this is located on our National Community Action Partnership website, where we have highlighted community action agencies who are doing innovative work in preventing homelessness and rehousing families. So some resources, toolkits, and innovative practices that are being implemented here in the Community Action Partnership. We also will be continuing to have these conversations through our partnership with the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So we've got some upcoming webinars in April. On April 26th, we'll be doing a webinar on deepening community action agency engagement in homeless service delivery and why that matters. And then we also in May will be having a webinar on effective coordination, working across service systems to impact homelessness. So we are grateful for our partnership with the National Alliance to End Homelessness and look forward to these continued conversations in this important subject. We have here our webinar Wednesdays. We have our national webinar series. So any future webinars that we have, you can be able to access those and learn more about what's being offered here through the National Community Action Partnership. Next week, we'll have another webinar coming up on community action, well-being, sabbaticals, and rest justice. And this will be an interactive webinar where participants will have the opportunity to learn from the experience of a community action agency's successful creation of an agency wellness plan that led to a funded 90-day sabbatical for the executive director. So an important conversation there on the subject of rest justice. We also have our Community Action Academy. This is our e-learning and peer sharing network resource for the Community Action Network. So we'll be sharing more information about that to be able to access the e-courses that we have available through the Community Action Academy. And then we have Fresh Funds. This is on our website as well, where you can explore the latest resources, webinars, and funding opportunities from other organizations that are engaging in anti-poverty efforts. And this list is updated periodically. We also have a Whole Family Approach Institute, which will be coming up June 6th through 8th in the Washington, D.C. area. So we'll be sending more information out about that as it becomes available as well. And we have our contact information here for the practice transformation team here at the National Community Action Partnership. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to any of us as well. And again, thank you all for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. We look forward to continuing this conversation with the National Alliance to End Homelessness and appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining us.